Okay, thank you, Rabbi Kutov. I appreciate the invitation to come speak for a few minutes to the Chashuv Talmidim of your yeshiva. Last year I had a nephew here, a great nephew, named Feifer. Maybe some of you remember who he is, Yisroel. This year I'm just coming to speak to some friends, Bez Hashem. Chazal tell us a very interesting lashon. They use the language, Chayiv Odom Loimar. Every person, every Yid is chayiv, is obligated to say, Mosai Yagiyo Maisai Lemaisai Avoisai Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov. When will my actions reach or touch the madrega of the Maisa of the Avos Avram Yitzchak and Yaakov? Very interesting lashon. You're chayiv to say it. You're obligated to say it. And what does that mean to say such a thing? We all know that as we go further back in generations, the people in Klal Yisrael were greater. Someone just told me over the story, which I'm sure everyone knows. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was flying on a plane, and a couple of his grandchildren were flying along with him, and the whole trip they're taking care of him. They're asking him, do you need a drink? Do you need something else? And not far from where he was sitting was an elderly, irreligious Jew. And he was watching and marveling over the tremendous Darchei, the kavod that they had towards Rabbi Yaakov. And he said to him, Rabbi, I'm also Jewish. I also have grandchildren. How come my grandchildren don't treat me with the respect that I see your grandchildren treating you? What's the secret? How do you train your grandchildren to show you respect? In our circles, the older you are, the less relevant you are. And the younger you are, the more with it you are, the more relevant you are. And Rabbi Yaakov said, I'll tell you, it's not very complicated. You train your children to believe in Darwin's theory. You teach them that science is fact and religion is legends. So your children are brought up thinking that they came from evolution, from a monkey. And every generation further away from monkey is on a higher level. Therefore, you're 2 generations closer to the monkey than your grandson. Why should they show you honor? My children believe that man was created by God. Klal Yisroel became a nation when they accepted the Torah at Har Sinai. The closer back you get to the original creation and to Matan Torah, to the original given of the Torah, the greater a human being is. So they show me respect. They look at me as a closer link to the Rabbi Shalom. A great man like Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, the names that I grew up as a bacher, the giants of our times, we had no shaykhs to understanding their greatness. In our days, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, Zechat Tzadik Levracha, a giant that mastered all of Gemara, Bavli, Yerushalmi. Go back another generation, it's beyond our comprehension how great people were. How could Chazal say that every human being, every Yid is obligated to say, when will my actions reach the actions of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the Avos HaKdoshim? It sounds impossible to reach that madrega. It's on a pshat. I'm leaving back to New York, Bez Hashem, today, right after early mincha. When a person gets into the car with his family driving, it's very common. I'm sure if anyone has driven long distance, they know this. The younger children, after about an hour into the trip, they say, Daddy, Tati, Mommy, are we there yet? How much longer till we get to New York? How many more hours? It's normal. It's part of the normal way how people act when they're in a car driving a long distance. But imagine now I'm going to go home after I finish speaking here. I'm going to grab some lunch before mincha. And as we're sitting down to eat lunch, my daughter would say to me, Daddy, how much longer till we get to New York? I would say, what do you mean? Well, how much longer is it? I said, what do you mean, how much longer? We didn't even get into the car yet. What do you mean, how much longer? When we start the trip, you can ask me, how much longer? And at the dining room table, you can't ask me, how much longer? Chazal are telling us, Chayiv Odom Loimar, a person's obligated to say, when will my actions reach the actions of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? What it means is you have to start the journey. You have to start trying to grow and become a bigger person, a better yid. When you start the journey, then you have a right, and it's normal to say, when will I reach the Madrega of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov? At least I'm on my way. I can ask, am I getting there? How much longer? How much greater do I have to be like Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? But when you're sitting in your couch and you haven't even took the first step towards that goal, you can't say, it's not normal to say, when am I going to reach that Madrega? What do you mean, when are you going to reach it? Start the journey. That's what Chazal is saying. A person has to start the journey. Now this week's Parsha and all the Parshas, starting from yesterday's Kriya all the way to end of Vayechi, is what Chazal say, Maisa Avos Siman Labanim. The actions of the Avos are a siman for the children, for the descendants. This week's Parsha especially is so packed with lessons that Chazal underline and try to give over to us. The first is the lesson of Chesed. Avraham Avinu's tremendous chesed, right after 3 days after he had his bris milah at 99 years old, he's running out to get guests. He's moise nefesh in tremendous pain, looking for guests. He can't bear the pain of not having guests. Is worse than the physical pain of the bris milah that he just had. And then the second chapter of the parsha is Avraham Avinu davening for the Anshe Stoim. It's like the example of what tefillah is. Davening not for oneself, davening for somebody else. And not just davening for someone else, davening for someone who is the exact opposite, the antithesis of what you are. Avraham is chesed, Stoim is the opposite of chesed. And yet Avraham Avinu davens for them. It's the example, the model of what tefillah is. And then finally, the last part of the parsha is the parsha of the Akedah, when Avraham Avinu willingly takes his only son and is ready to slaughter him, give him up as a carbon to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 3 giant lessons from Avraham Avinu: his chesed, his tefillah, his mesiras nefesh, his avodah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But this is I thought of this ha'ara once. Think about these 3 tremendous lessons that Chazal underline and teach us. The chesed of Avraham Avinu. But let's think for a minute. Who did Avraham Avinu end up being machnes oirich at the beginning of the parsha? He was inviting in malachim. Chazal tell us malachim don't eat. They were making believe that they were eating. They had a way to make it look like they were eating the food that Avraham prepared. Really, what Avraham did was a waste of time, l'chayra. He didn't do any achnasas archim. He invited guests that were malachim, angels. They don't need food. They don't need the tongue and mustard. They don't need the bread. They don't need the milk. They need nothing. They don't eat. So really, if we think about it, Avraham Avinu wasted and failed in his attempt to do chesed. It was a beautiful attempt, but he didn't accomplish. Chapter number 2, the tefillah of Avraham Avinu. He davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to save the people of Stoim. If there's 50, there's 45 tzaddikim, 40, 30, 20. What happened at the end? There weren't 10 tzaddikim. And Stoim was destroyed. L'chayra, a failed tefillah. And then Avraham Avinu was ready to make the ultimate sacrifice, to take his only son and bring him as a carbon to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we all know what happened there. Ultimately, he failed. And he failed. He was told at the end, stop, don't do it. So all these 3 tremendous lessons that are highlighted by Chazal really are 3 failures. A failed attempt to do chesed, a failed attempt to save Stoim with the tefillah, a failed attempt to sacrifice one's future, one's only son. And these are the lessons that Chazal trumpet and underline and impress us with, that they're such important lessons to learn. If it's not successful, what's the point? And I think that this is mamish, one of the biggest yisoidis that a person could learn in life. I have a chaver who teaches in Muncie. He told me one of the first things and one of the most important lessons that he tells his talmidim every year is, as he says to them, you have to know that by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's only one measuring stick with which to measure success, and that is a person's effort. Nothing else is taken into account. What you actually end up doing is irrelevant. Avraham Avinu can actually accomplish no chesed. It's irrelevant. What's relevant is, look at his Mesiras Nefesh in his attempt to do Achnosas Orchim. Avram's tefillah perhaps accomplished 0, and the stone was destroyed anyway. It's irrelevant. What's relevant is, look how he davened for another human being's success to save another human being. Avram Avinu's failure in bringing his son as a carbon is also, it's irrelevant. What's relevant is, look what he was willing to do. He was willing to try and bring his son as a carbon. This is the yesod of a Yid's life. I think is only, will never come close to the accomplishments of our avos. But our goal in life is to try to match their maisim, to try that our actions should be actions that mimic, that copy, that are aspiring to get towards the madrega of Avraham Avinu. And the ikar is to start, to make the first steps. A person has to remember in Yiddishkeit the tremendous accomplishment that we do just by putting in the first effort. Every time we do something, Leman Hashem, we have to remember what we're doing for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the gewaldige simcha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has with our attempts. I remember I just recently was listening to a shmuz from a Chassidish mashpia, I couldn't hear the name, if it's Breyer or Bleier, but he said he once was collecting money with another Yid for a certain very important cause. And every few minutes as they were walking from door to door, the other fellow would stop and say, I was zoicha to be matriach, to bother ourselves and extend ourselves for the sake of another Yid. I was so fortunate. And he would give himself a chizuk and go continue on. And a few minutes later he would say, so far we were embarrassed 5 times. 5 people didn't give us any money. And we're going further in order to help another Yid. I was so fortunate. And every few minutes he would stop and give himself another chizuk. And this person said, I saw how a person with thinking could change failure into success, into joy. Because all that counts is if we remember that what we're doing is, we're doing Leman Hashem, and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so machshav our efforts that we do. Every time we sit down to learn a Blat Gemara, every time we open up a siddur and we daven, we should remember what we know b'yediyah, we know in our minds, that Rabbi Menachem has a tremendous nachas ruach when he sees us learning, when he sees us davening. One saw a moshel, Lamad Bavadoima, Ar Avodas Hashem. Remember, if I might have said this here, it's one of my favorite mishalim. I might have said it here once before, and those that have been here before when I spoke, I asked them to bear with me. Chazorah, the fellow who was very down and out, lost his job, and he was unemployed for a number of months. And as the weeks turned into months, his bill by the grocery store kept on growing. His mortgage payments, he started falling behind. He starts getting letters from the gas company, they're going to shut his gas. The electric company is going to shut his electricity. And one morning he comes into shul one Sunday morning, and he just breaks down. The whole davening, he's just crying. Rabbi Shalom, have rachmanis on me. What am I going to do? We're going to be thrown out of my home. My children are going to be on the street. I can't feed them. Please help me. And there's another person in the shul that notices, comes over to him and says to him, David, I noticed today you were mamish broken. What's going on? What's happening with you? He says, Yankel, what can I tell you? I lost my job. It's already almost 5 months. I have no income. I have letters from every company that I owe money to. They're shutting me off. They're throwing me out. What am I going to do? He says, David, I understand you. If you have such problems, why don't you come over to me right away? You know I'm a well-to-do person. You don't think I would want to help you? Come over, say something to me. How am I supposed to read your mind? You never told me you lost your job. I'm going to hire you right away. I'll take you in. You'll do something for me. He says, you serious? Yes, of course I'm serious. Let me just try to think of what I can get you to do. He says, I want to ask you, but tell me no if the answer is no. Are you going to be embarrassed if I ask you to do some cleaning for me, like maybe custodial type work, if it's beneath your dignity, just tell me. I'll try to think of something else. He says, no, nothing's beneath my dignity. If it earns me a salary, I'm willing to do anything. He says, great. I really need someone to do some cleaning up in my house. He says, you got it. He says, you'd be ready to start tomorrow morning at 9? Absolutely. Okay. So 9 to 5, is that a good hours? He says, perfect. He says, okay, let's talk salary. What would you want for an hour? He says, whatever you pay me is fine. He says, $50 an hour will be enough? He says, $50 an hour? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to insult you. $75 an hour? I'm sorry, I don't know wages these days. $100 an hour? He says, please don't say any more because I'm going to faint on the spot. $100 an hour is more than enough. He says, okay. So tomorrow you'll be at my house at 9 o'clock. I'll be there 8:55, waiting for you. I'm ready, no matter what it is, I'll be there. $100 an hour, thank you so much, you saved my life. The next morning, 8:55, he's standing outside the door. The guy lets him in, he says, look, again, if you feel uncomfortable, tell me, and you don't have to do the job. He says, I don't feel uncomfortable, I can wash your bathrooms. He says, no, it's not that bad. I'll tell you a thing, people don't know how wealthy I really am. I'm not a millionaire. I'm actually, and between the two of us, I'm actually a multi-billionaire. I have this crazy, I'm a shagas, that my wife can't stand. Whenever I do a business deal and my profit is less than $1 million, I have this mishagas. I like to take the money out in $100 bills and I just dump it into my basement. Okay. He says, so it's like this. This has been going on for over 20 years. My basement is like up to here in $100 bills. You got to wade through the $100 bills to get to anything you want in the basement. Just last week, my wife said to me, if I don't clean the basement out from these $100 bills, I'm being thrown out of the house. So I really need someone desperately to clean up the basement. What do you say? He says, that sounds fine. What do you want me to do exactly? He says, here. He gives him a package, a box with a bunch of blue bags, and he gives him a box with rubber bands. He says, go downstairs, pile up the $100 bills in neat piles, let's say 100 in each pile, put a rubber band around each one, put them into the blue recycling bags, and when you finish, put them out at the end of my driveway. He says, why at the end of your driveway? He says, tomorrow morning is a recycle day. They're going to pick up the recycling, so if it's at the end of the driveway, they'll pick it up. He says, you want me to put bags of $100 bills at the end of your driveway for the recycling to pick them up? He says, yeah. If you don't want to schlep it, just leave it here. I'll get some. No. I want to ask something. If I decide instead of putting it at the end of your driveway, if I want to bring it home to my house, would you mind? He says, you put it up by your recycling? I'll take care of it. You don't have to worry. Can I take it home to my house? He says, why not? What do I care? You want to take it? Just want to take it. He says, get me, where's the basement door? I'm going downstairs to start working. He opens up the basement door, and the guy goes downstairs, and he starts taking the $100 bills, he's piling them up and putting rubber bands on. He's working for 3.5 hours. All of a sudden, he hears the voice from upstairs. Okay, it's 12:30. He says, I have till 5. No, but 12:30 is lunch. I don't need lunch. He says, no, you have to eat lunch. I'm telling you, I'm full. I don't need lunch. I insist. Come up for lunch. Oh, okay. Walks up the stairs. He says, here, sit down. He sits down. The table is set. There's bread, and there's a Vorspeise, an appetizer. He says, well, what's this about? He says, well, you're eating lunch with me. I'm just not going to give you a snack. We're going to wash. No, I don't wash during the week. He says, why not? It's Rosh Chodesh today. Okay, fine. He washes, he starts things, he says, okay, I'm ready to mention. 1 second. We didn't say a Dvar Torah by the table. Okay, quick, let's say a Dvar Torah. There's no rushing here. We didn't barely got to the main course. Hold on. And he schleps out. The meal goes for 45 minutes. By the time they finish benching, this guy is so anxious to get back down to the basement. Finally, at 1:15, lunch is over. He runs downstairs and starts working again. 5 o'clock, the door opens up again. Okay, it's 5 o'clock. He says, so? It's over. The work day is over. He says, I'm not finished yet. There's tomorrow. I don't mind working overtime. No. I'm not working overtime. I take care of my workers. 5 o'clock, the day is over. Okay. The day's over, he has no choice. He takes the 2 big bags that he's already piled up, and he starts climbing up the steps of the basement. He walks up, he's like flying up the steps. He can't believe his fortune. And as he's getting to the door, the balabas says to him, wait! I knew it. There's a catch. He said, there's no catch. So why are you stopping me? You're forgetting something. What am I forgetting? You told me I could take them home. Yeah, of course you can take them home. So why are you stopping me? He says, I didn't pay you yet. Pay me? Yeah, we made up $100 an hour for 8 hours. What do you think I forgot? He takes out his checkbook and he writes him out a check for $800 for the work. Boys, sounds like a fairy tale. Of course it is. But it's not really a fairy tale. Because that's exactly what happens every day to every year that's ever been created that lives on this world. The Rebbeinu Shem says to us, I'm letting you count up as many lines of Gemara as you want. Every word of Gemara is equal to 613 mitzvahs. Every Mishnah that you learn is a chock full of mitzvahs, each word worth equal to all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Learn it and you can keep it. You can take it home with you. It's yours. But not just I'm letting you keep it. I'm actually going to pay you. I'm going to pay you a salary for becoming wealthy. You could take every word of Gemara, every word of Torah, every word of Tefillah that you daven, and it's your possession. It becomes your acquisition. You own it. It's yours. Now your neshama is more wealthy, is more enriched by every word of Kedusha that you are allowed to take. But not just you get to keep it. The Rebbeinu says, I'm going to give you a salary. I'm going to pay you in this world and the next for gathering all those $100 bills. Rabbi said, if a person would just think a little bit. I saw Rav Melech Bitterman says that the word besimcha, with joy, has the same letters as the word machshava, thought. If a person would just think a little bit machshava, before he sits down to learn with his Rabbi, before he opens up and sits down, he would think for a moment, what am I ready to start doing now? I'm ready to gather millions, billions dollars worth of value by learning, by davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And not only am I going to become so wealthy by every word that I acquire, but the Rebbeinu is going to give me a salary. He's going to pay me lefum tzara for the more difficult it is, the more reward. I always tell my talmidim in yeshiva, when a bacha says to me sometimes in the morning, I'm sure one of you, Mustama, had this, that you tell your everyone, Rabbi, please today leave me alone. I'm so tired. You don't know what last night, the Mlamaka didn't end till who knows when. My parents were away. I was up to, today I'm dead tired. I always say the same thing, and I admit the guys get upset when I say it to them. I said, you're dead tired. You're so lucky. I'm going to arrange with the Rebbeinu some double reward today. You're zeicha to learn Torah even though you're tired. And this, I remember I saw Rosh Hashiva in Yisroel, a younger man, a bacher, told him, Rabbi, what should I do? He asked him, what should I do? I come sometimes to yeshiva, I'm just not in the mood of learning. What should I do? And the Yeshiva said to him, you're so fortunate. The last time I had a day that I didn't feel like learning was more than 30 years ago. Baruch Hashem, you're zeicha. You could learn Torah even though you don't feel like it. Your reward for learning is so much bigger than when I get rewarded because I feel like learning. By me, it's enjoyable. I want to learn. You're so lucky you get to learn even though you don't want to learn. I can't even imagine the reward you're going to get for sitting and learning when you're not in the mood. And finally, they say when the stipler was asked by a younger man, he said, I'm learning in Koil already for 5 years. I thought by this time in my life that there would never come a day when I would come to Koil in the morning and just not be in the mood. But Rebbe, I have to admit, I wouldn't say it publicly to anyone else, but there's days I come into the Koil in the morning and I just don't feel like learning. I'm surprised at myself. There's days I don't feel like learning. What should I do when I don't feel like learning? And the amazing answer the stipler gave was, do what I do. He says, what does the Rebbe mean? He says, do what I do when I'm not in the mood of learning. What does the Rebbe do? I learn anyway. That's what I do. That's the trick. A person has to commit himself to start the trip, start the trek, trying to reach the goal, the aspiration of reaching somewhere, if not our accomplishments, but our actions should mimic the great actions of the Ovis HaKdoshim. And when we do our part, when we put in our effort, we're gaining not just in the tremendous enrichment to our neshamas, but in the reward that the Rebbe is going to give us. And the less we feel like it, the more the reward. Lefum tzara, the more difficult it is, the more our reward. The Rebbe should bench all of us. We should all be zeicha to reach a madrega of loving to learn Torah, of enjoying it and learning b'simcha. But until then, we have to use our machshava to trigger our simcha. We should be zeicha to learn b'simcha, to be oived Hashem b'simcha. Each one of us should give tremendous nachas to the Borei Olam. And I thank you so much for allowing me to speak. Okay, pleasure to be here.